NBC News has just confirmed that actor Malcolm-Jamal Warner has at the age of 54. Authorities in Costa Rica telling NBC News that Warner accidentally drowned while swimming in the ocean on Sunday. Warner is best known for...
The official story is simple. Too simple. A beloved figure, a warm voice from our TV past, swept away in the waters of Costa Rica. But the moment Ice Cube stepped up to a microphone and started talking, that neat, tragic package began to crack wide open. We've all heard of accidents. This, he insists, wasn't one. He paints a picture of a Hollywood machine that rewards loyalty to the unspoken rules and grinds down anyone who refuses to play along. And Malcolm-Jamal Warner, in Cube's telling, wasn't just a respected actor and musician. He was a man who had pulled back the curtain far enough to see the gears turning. That glimpse, Cube suggests, was all it took to make him a problem that needed to be managed.
Did they
work with artists?
Did they manipulate you?
No. I'm an independent artist. Always have been.
Warner's rise was the stuff of legend in Black Hollywood. Theo Huxtable was more than a role. It was a symbol, a bridge between what audiences thought they knew and what they'd never been allowed to see. After the sitcom years, Warner kept his hands clean, kept his work respected, and steered clear of the scandals that swallowed so many peers. Which is exactly why Cube's version of events is so unnerving. Because if someone that careful, that private, can still end up caught in a dangerous undercurrent, literal and otherwise, what message does that send to the rest of the industry? Cube's warning is blunt. Warner had been tracking threads of systemic rot in the entertainment world. Not petty gossip, but the kind of interlocking influence, labels, networks, and unseen benefactors, that shapes which stories get told, which careers soar, and which are quietly suffocated. We've heard Cube speak before about gatekeepers, those faceless operators who keep talent in their lanes, and his willingness to say what others only hint at. But now he's tying Warner's final months to something darker. That alone has people shifting in their seats. If there was pressure on Warner to back off, where did it come from? And why did he refuse?
Look, I enjoyed everything there was to enjoy about growing up on television. But there was a responsibility because I had a head on my shoulders and I was around other people who had head on their shoulders. So that access didn't really come down my path because I wasn't around.
The first fissure in the official narrative comes with whispers of the so-called secret Cosby tapes. According to Cube, Warner wasn't just talking about making change, he was collecting receipts. The story goes that Warner had recorded high-level conversations, some involving his old mentor Bill Cosby, that wandered into territory nobody wanted public. Hushed admissions, thinly veiled threats, offhand remarks that, in the cold light of day, would look a lot like proof of an inner circle protecting its own. We don't know who first leaked the idea that these tapes existed, but once the rumor landed, it spread fast. And suddenly, Warner's reputation for discretion took on a different shade. Maybe he was careful not because he had nothing to hide, but because he was sitting on something too dangerous to spill without a plan. Think about what those recordings could mean. If they're real, they don't just tarnish reputations, they redraw the map of who holds power in the entertainment business. The network executives who've survived scandal after scandal. The label owners who've shaped musical trends like puppet strings. The sponsors who've turned a blind eye when the money was right. Every one of them would have reason to make sure those files never saw daylight. And yet here was Warner, still showing up for podcast tapings, still making public appearances with a look that friends now say was more determined than they'd realized. A man on a countdown clock, maybe, hoping to make his move before the clock made its move on him.
People who own the labels own private prisons.
And then there's the shadow hovering over all of it, the talk of an Illuminati-style initiation gone sideways. Cube has never claimed to be in that club, but he's been clear he thinks it's out there, a cabal of industry power brokers who reward obedience and punish defiance. In this frame, Warner wasn't just a beloved TV son, he was an invited guest who refused to take the oath. Some say he turned down offers to join exclusive retreats where new members are brought in, groomed, and bound by favors they can never repay. Whether you believe in the full cloak and dagger version, or see it as a metaphor for the tight grip of elite Hollywood, the pattern is the same. Cross the line, and you don't get warnings twice. What makes Warner's case sting even more is that he wasn't the type to bluff. Friends describe him as private but fearless when it mattered. If he thought the system was rigged, he wasn't going to smile for the camera and hope it passed. That stubborn streak is inspiring when it's fiction. In reality, it can make you very visible to people who prefer you stay invisible. Cube hints that Warner's refusal to play along wasn't just a personal choice, it was an act of resistance that others had been too scared to attempt. Which forces us to ask, even if we don't want the answer, if they can reach someone like him, who else might be next?
I'm talking about the club of gatekeepers that we all gotta deal with.
Ice Cube's warning has never been just about one man. In his eyes, Warner's final chapter is a cautionary tale for anyone who steps outside the lines drawn by Hollywood's hidden referees. We've heard Cube talk before about gatekeepers, those unlisted names who decide who gets the big roles, the major tours, the primetime slots, and who gets left knocking on doors that will never open again. Warner's arc fits the mold too perfectly to ignore. He went from the pinnacle of network television to carving out a quieter, independent path, one where he chose projects for meaning rather than marketability. To some, that's a career shift. To others, it's an act of defiance that the system simply doesn't forgive.
I don't think Ice Cube knows who the puppeteers are. He understands that there are puppeteers, and he can tell from his own experience both.
What makes this theory stick is how Cube frames it. Warner's passing wasn't just a loss, it was a warning. A signal, loud and clear, to any artist who thinks their talent and legacy alone can shield them from the consequences of speaking out. The entertainment industry, Cube argues, doesn't just bury people, it buries their impact. If Warner really was on the verge of making public the kind of information Cube hints at, then removing him from the conversation also meant removing the chance for those truths to gain traction. And when we look at the last few years of Warner's life, from his podcast work to his outspoken views on representation and authenticity, it's hard not to see a man positioning himself to reach a wider audience with a message that didn't serve the gatekeepers' interests. And that's why the absence of hard evidence from Costa Rica gnaws at so many people. In an era where the smallest street argument ends up on 10 different social feeds within minutes, how do we explain a public emergency on a sunny beach, with multiple witnesses, leaving us with no credible footage? We've been told there were bystanders, we've been told they tried to help, we've even been told about a second man who was pulled from the water in critical condition. But what we haven't seen is the raw, unfiltered video that inevitably surfaces when real life collides with tragedy in a public place. No shaky phone clips, no muffled voices calling for help, nothing.
Know that this incident took place on Sunday in Costa Rica. He was on a family vacation. He was swimming off of the coast of a town called Cocles in the province of Limon. He was swimming at Playa Grande. I mean, I've visited Costa Rica a few times. I was there with my family a few years ago, and those currents can be...
This is where Cube's theory digs in. If there was nothing to hide, why is there nothing to see? Are we supposed to believe that on a beach full of tourists, not a single phone was filming? That no lifeguard cam, no hotel security feed, no local onlooker caught even a frame? A few industry insiders we've spoken to whisper that any footage that did exist may have been seized before it could circulate, a move that wouldn't just protect Warner's dignity, but could also protect anyone who doesn't want questions asked about what really happened that day. Because here's the thing, the Costa Rican Red Cross worked on Warner for more than 20 minutes. That's a long time in front of a crowd, enough time for cameras to be rolling, angles to be caught, voices to be recorded. And yet, in the weeks since, we have no verifiable clips, no leaked audio, no still photos beyond posed images from before the trip. It's as though the moment the tide pulled him under, the whole scene slid into a shadow the rest of us aren't allowed to see. That eerie vacuum in an age of constant documentation is exactly the sort of gap Cube says signals a controlled narrative.
I wanted to remind you, as I remind myself, that no matter what's going on, there's always a reason to smile. Like, if you just take a minute to stop and take stock, I guarantee you can find at least one reason to smile. And if for some reason you can't find a reason to smile, then that's probably the best time to be the reason for somebody else.
And when we trace the shape of that narrative, we see the familiar outlines of Hollywood control. Stories get smoothed down, timelines get tightened, and anything that invites more questions than answers gets quietly erased. Warner's story, at least the official one, now begins and ends with a vacation gone wrong. No mention of the tapes. No nod to his frustration with the machine. No suggestion that his refusal to conform might have made him a target. Just a clean, containable tragedy. In the business of image management, that's the mark of professionals. Cube's campaign against these so-called gatekeepers has already cost him connections and opportunities by his own admission. He's blunt about being kept outside the club, about being told, not always in words, to stay in his lane. And he's made it clear he has no intention of doing that. Which is why his comments about Warnerland like more than speculation. They sound like the continuation of a fight he's been waging for years. He's not just saying, look what happened to this man. He's saying, this is what happens when you push back.
Police, you don't think that's a classic song?
It's classic because of what it represents in terms of Black struggle symbolism and what Black people have gone through with the police historically. It's the song that makes you go, yeah! Yeah, I get how it can touch your emotions, but it don't do nothing for me.
Straight out of Compton, gangster.
If we follow that logic, Warner's absence isn't just personal loss. It's strategic removal. It's the deletion of a voice that had built trust over decades. A voice that could have brought credibility to allegations most people dismiss until they hear them from someone they've known on screen since childhood. And if the people Cube calls gatekeepers feared that credibility, then erasing it would be an investment in preserving their own reach and control. In the final months before his trip to Costa Rica, Warner's voice took on a different weight in episodes of his podcast, Not All Hood. The show, already known for exploring the nuances of Black culture beyond media stereotypes, began weaving in more pointed observations about systems and structures that felt bigger than any single industry. He never spelled out names or dates, but longtime listeners noticed the shift. There was a new urgency in the way he spoke about accountability, a sharper edge in his metaphors about wolves in tailored suits and ladders with missing rungs. It was as if he'd started coding his message for those willing to listen between the lines.
Between gigs, I could float and things are cool. But, there's another level of responsibility, having a wife and a daughter. So there's that. But there's also there is a newfound freedom that I'm having with my craft.
Some episodes carried moments that, in hindsight, feel almost like farewells. In one, he spoke at length about the importance of documenting your own narrative before others write it for you, an idea that now lands with a chilling resonance. The rhythm of his speech slowed when he touched on the topic, and he layered it with talk of archiving truth in ways that could bypass the filters of traditional media. The average listener might have brushed it off as poetic musing, but for those aware of Cube's own battles with gatekeepers, it sounded like a man sketching the blueprint of a back-channel warning system. There were also repeated references to circles that close ranks, a phrase he used more than once when discussing how certain careers in entertainment suddenly stall without obvious reason. While the surface topic was about opportunities in Hollywood, the examples he chose, actors who disappeared from the spotlight after refusing certain roles or declining specific endorsements, suggested he was hinting at a more coordinated form of exclusion. The casual listener heard anecdotes. The attentive one heard a map of pressure points in an industry that thrives on silence.
My mother, who again, we lived every year of the show as if it was the last year because we just didn't know. So because she was always, impressed upon me the importance of what was happening down the line and not just with this show, there wasn't really space to just be like, hey, I'm chilling because I'm on TV and this is...
Even his choice of guests shifted subtly in those last few recordings. He brought on independent filmmakers, self-published authors, and grassroots organizers, people who had bypassed traditional gatekeepers entirely. The conversations often drifted toward resilience and autonomy, lingering on the idea that once you learn how a system works, you can't unsee it, and you can't go back to playing the same game by their rules. These were stories of survival outside the machine, and in context, they feel like the mirror Warner wanted to hold up for anyone considering a similar path. Perhaps the most haunting detail is that the final recorded episode ends on an unfinished sentence, cut abruptly by the closing music. On release day, listeners took it as a technical glitch or artistic choice, but now, with the context of his sudden absence, the abruptness feels different. It leaves a void, a deliberate open loop that invites the mind to wander into possibilities. Was it a symbolic parting shot? A way of telling his audience that some truths can't be spoken in full? Or was it simply the last moment before someone or something decided his story had gone far enough?
You don't like anything Ice Cube's done?
Nothing. Ice Cube does nothing for me as a rapper and an actor.
Okay.
Nothing.
The possibility is chilling that the same networks, labels, and production houses that built Warner into a household name could also play a role, direct or indirect, in making sure his final act is one they get to write. We're left with a silence where there should be noise, a gap where there should be a flood of details. And that gap, once you've noticed it, starts to look less like coincidence and more like design. Maybe that's why Cube's words resonate beyond the usual circles of conspiracy chatter. He's not a fringe blogger shouting into the void. He's a man who's been in the boardrooms, signed the contracts, seen how quickly alliances shift when there's money or influence on the line. When he says there are people who put guardrails around you or actually put a gate up, it doesn't sound like metaphor. It sounds like lived experience.
They're not actually running the labels.
They have
things.
financial interest in it.
They have financial interest.
Okay, so if they have financial interest in the prisons.
So what happens when someone like Warner decides to climb over that gate? We may never get the unfiltered answer. But the missing footage, the scrubbed narrative, the too perfect simplicity of the official account, those are the cracks we can still see. And once you see them, it's hard to stop wondering what's behind the wall. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable question of all. If Cube is right, Warner's passing isn't an isolated case. It's part of a larger system, one that measures people, not by their talent or their legacy, but by their willingness to play the long game without stepping out of bounds. And if that's the real rulebook, how many others are already marked for removal? How far will Hollywood go to keep its most profitable secrets locked away? What do you think really happened on that beach in Costa Rica? And who might be pulling the strings we can't see? Drop your thoughts below, because this is one story that deserves every spotlight we can put on it. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and don't look away.